Just time how long 10 takes, and you put a stopwatch, and then
Ah! What's the name? That little needle is so tough. How does it? What do you need it for? Is this supposed to be between the yellow, the
it's
white and
supposed
red?
to be on automatic.
What's the needle for?
Well, that's for the voice level afterwards.
Oh, when I do it higher, it goes up much faster.
Yeah, right. But here, this is on
Auto.
automatic. Auto. Okay, now let's start before I get cold.
Hello, this is reporter Julia Posey interviewing Mrs. Ann Posey about World War II and her life at the time. Hello, Mrs. Posey.
Well, hello, Julia.
Well, the first question I would like to ask you is, whereabouts did you live?
Well, you might be able to tell, number one, that I'm English, and being English, I lived in England. And I happened to live in England during the war in London, where that's really where all the action was. And so I've discovered that since I've been living in the United States, which is about 10 years now, that not very many people in this area actually experienced World War II. And I was 7 years old, so I remember it very vividly.
Was it, did you live, well, when you lived in London, was it a huge city, the part that you lived in?
Yes, I lived in the center of London, which if any of you've studied England at all, there's Knightsbridge and Mayfair and, well, the equivalent of Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue in New York. But London is a very, very big city and very old. You know, it's nothing to have buildings that are 5, 6, 7, 800 years old.
Well, as when you were a child, were you aware about the war, and did you know a lot about it?
Not until bombs started falling. You know, I mean, it was a thing that adults spoke about or talked about the Germans and how we should negotiate peace treaties and things, and there are a whole lot of things. English people are rather inclined to think that a disaster is not going to happen to them. They live on an island completely surrounded by water, and we all feel that we're insular. Insular is a word. Things just don't affect English
just
people.
Feel sort of safe?
Very smug is really what the word is. You know, we just sort of feel that the world evolves around us.
Because you're an island in this
Because
water?
we're an island. We're a tiny little island, but
well,
we feel we're terribly important.
Germans could come and get you in a boat.
Yeah, that was really one of the reasons why they didn't come and get us in a boat. You know, they had to go through France and Holland and all the other European countries before they, trying to get at us, they had to go through a lot of other countries, so we're not surrounded by water. You know, so we were self-sufficient. We've always felt self-sufficient.
Well, Hitler was in Germany, but did you ever see him in England? Or
yes, he was on newsreels. You know, people you didn't have television to watch like you do over here. You listened to the newscasts, radios as we used to call them, or the wireless.
Did you ever see him with your eyes?
Yes, because they'd have newsreels when you go into the movies, which was our main form of entertainment. They would have, you know, Hitler, Achtung, Achtunging all over the place, and he had all his German troops doing the goose step. You know, they all had to. Have you ever seen the goose step? The way the Germans march. The Germans march with straight legs from the hip up, and they in perfect unison. You know. Germans, in my opinion, are really rather like sheep. You tell them to do something, the whole damn country does it. So they were all told to, even the children, you know, they got into the Nazi movement, and everybody would wear uniforms, and they'd have swastikas, and this...
The children?
Yes, this man, Hitler, hypnotized. He was a bit of a nut, but he just absolutely hypnotized an entire nation
We read that in the book.
to do what he
Yeah.
wanted,
Mhm.
and they did it. So we'd see all these newsreels. We knew what was going on, but you felt when you're living in an island and you're surrounded by water, this is something that's happening to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, it couldn't possibly happen to you. Only all of a sudden it did. The Germans developed guns and tanks and airplanes.
Did England ever fight back?
Yes,
I never-
like more than anybody. We
Oh, you did?
We started the war. I mean, we were the ones that started the war, and we ended the war.
Mhm.
Americans came in and helped. They like to think that they won it, but I mean, we've been doing it for 5 years before they.
What were your communications like?
We had radar, which was invented in Europe. We were
Yeah,
very
like,
lucky.
okay, in the book, Anne Frank, they had a radio. They had,
Mhm.
it was illegal, they weren't supposed to have it, they had a radio.
It's like ham radio.
Yeah.
Everybody
Did
had
you have
ham
one?
radios.
Did you have one?
My father did, up in the,
Did he-
higher parts of the.
Who contacted him or did he
Everyone was
listen in?
contacting, yes, everyone was contacting everybody else. And my father was an old man, so he could not be in the army. He'd been in World War One.
Oh my God.
Right. So he couldn't be in World War II, but people who were in their 40s and 50s and what have you, and even older, were the Home Guard, which is like our National Guard over here. You have your Air National
Mhm.
Guard, but they're private citizens, So we had our private citizens because we had all the men from the age of 18 were all fighting in France.
Mhm. Okay, another thing we read about was food rations. Did you have them?
Yes, we had
You
food
did?
rations. I'll give you an example because liking candy, I know you like candy and that most people like candy. I had 2 ounces of candy a month was the ration.
2 ounces
2
of candy?
ounces of candy.
What are you doing?
We're recording.
Never mind.
Okay,
Oh, would it matter? Do we play it back? He always comes and turns on his toothpick at the favorite time.
okay, we'll get back. Now, 2 ounces of candy is where you were.
Yeah, okay.
No,
And
was this a candy of your choice? Because they had
Yes.
sugar rations, right?
you had sugar rationing.
Well, was your candy in with the sugar?
No, you had a book, and every single thing that you ate had coupons, rather like freezer's stamps. And that was the only way you could eat. So if you went on Monday and bought your ration of beef for the month, you'd had it. But everybody, they calculated food that was adequate to live. And it didn't matter whether you were a millionaire or not. In
Mhm.
fact, poor people did very well during the war because they got a much better balanced diet.
Oh yeah. Because everybody got the same.
Everybody got the same, and so they got better balanced diets. Their teeth became better, their bones became better. Equality started to
Yeah, but then the
appear.
millionaires and rich guys didn't do as well that we used to did that.
No, because there was a black market. If you
Yeah, I read
had
about that.
enough money, you could buy 2 hams. You could sort of pay your way, but then that was unpatriotic. You really didn't feel too good.
Was anything else rationed?
Clothing.
Clothing was rationed?
Clothing like panties, underwear, bras, every single item. Now you could have your rationing book and decide that all you're going to buy that 6 months or that year was underwear. But then you'd had it. There was no way you could buy a dress
For how long? About?
from 1939 till 1945.
Wow. Geez,
Yeah.
I couldn't live like that.
Yes, you could. It didn't mean anything. I must
That didn't
admit.
bother you?
No, because there was everybody else I thought, in the world living like that. It was just the
okay, so
way
it
of
didn't bother
life.
you too much, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've heard you mention this, but I'll still ask you, how frequently did you get bombed?
Every single night.
Certain time or what?
There were certain areas in England that the Germans thought we had our factories that were building the planes that were bombing the Germans. So obviously they, as soon as it started to be dusk at night, you'd have the air raid sirens, you know, so woo, woo, and everyone would go into their shelters, or they'd go down into the underground, which is a mile down under the earth, where our trains and what have you run. We have this underground, you know, like in Boston, you've been in Boston,
yeah.
only this goes a mile underground, 5 or 6 levels.
Yeah.
In fact, there were some tragedies, you know, with people being killed because they'd panic, and the people at the top would push the ones at the bottom, and the ones at the bottom would suffocate, trying to get out of the way of the bombs that were falling. But at night, the Germans would come over in droves, and they have a funny sound. Their engines didn't have the same sound as the English planes. The airplanes themselves. It was a zing, 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 and it was a scary. I mean, it was scary.
Were you really scared?
Not scared. It was just that this is what was going to happen, and what was it going to be like when you woke up? Because they could only bomb you for, say, 2 hours, because they didn't have enough fuel in the planes to, you know, last all that long. So they would try to destroy London, because there are, 14 million people living in that area, and that's where all the factories and things were, and so they tried to just demoralize and scare everybody, but didn't work. But the noise of the planes, you know, you got that every single night. You hid from them, and then when the all clear went, which was just a very monotonous sound. It would go.
What would?
The siren, which would mean that the air raid was over.
Oh,
the last
yeah.
of the Germans are gone, and you'd open your door, and the whole sky would be red, like that fire when Morse Mill went up the other day. Entire London.
Why?
Because the bombs. They would
Was
have
stuff
bombs.
on fire?
Of course, they had high incendiary bombs. They had high explosive
Wasn't
bombs.
it spooky?
Yeah,
Weird?
I guess so. But when you live like that every day, it isn't spooky. That's just part of life.
No,
You
'cause
had
we have
landmines.
We have a firecracker go off in front of our house, get all excited.
Now, this was, you'd wake up and there wouldn't be any houses in the street next to you, you know, and everyone would be dead. There'd be great holes in the ground, and you wouldn't be able to use that road for 2 or 3 months because they didn't get it repaired. There was constantly smoke hanging over the city, and yet the big important landmarks like Buckingham Palace, where the King and Queen lived, and they stayed there during the war, and St. Paul's Cathedral, which is a very beautiful architectural piece of an old church, that never got bombed. There were some surprising things that did not get touched during the war.
Were there any unusual incidences that happened? I know there must have been. I mean, that's...
You mean to me?
Yeah.
Well, one of them is, I've got several. Now, if you want me to hurry up and tell them, I've got 3 in particular.
Okay, you can tell the 3, you know,
All
just
right, I'll
so
tell the
briefly,
3.
but...
One is that the air raid siren went off in the middle of the afternoon one day instead of at night. You know, they did some surprise attacks. And my mother was upstairs, and it was a house with a long staircase.
Was this your house?
This was our house,
Yeah.
and it had a long, long staircase, and, you know, she heard the sound, boom, and I was downstairs, but anyhow, we had a Pekingese dog. She jumped from the top to the bottom of the stairs without touching one. It was just a reaction. She was scared. She heard the sounds, and this is my mother, so she jumped. She landed. I mean, she should have won an Olympic prize, the way she took off, and she dove under her double bed.
Your kid, the whole, I mean, are they longer than our stairs out here?
Like 88. Yes, they were long. But, you know, when you're frightened, you don't think about it. So there's my mother who jumps from the top to the bottom, and there's this Pekingese dog, and they're yappy dogs, and he's dashing down the stairs with his tail flapping away. You know, my mother's dashed into this dining room that we've turned over into an air raid shelter. This is where we lived every single night during the war. And she got under the double bed where she and my father slept, and she got stuck. Because she went head first, and it was low, and the dog started to lick her nose. No way could she get out of that thing because there's this dog snuffling away and licking her face, and she's got her arms behind her because she dived as if she was diving into water.
Oh, yeah.
So that was one funny sort of
Was there
incident.
any incidents that were dangerous or could?
Yes, one of the high incendiary bombs.
What's high incendiary?
High incendiary, high explosive bombs. They were the sort of bombs that when you draw as kids, they were big and they had a lumpy end on it and they were long and pointed, and this is what they used to bomb us with. And one of them landed in the back seat of our car in the garage.
Went through the roof?
It went through the roof, and it went in the back seat and the sort of passenger side, and it didn't go off. And we've got the bomb detonator squad, and they took it to pieces. And there was a hole in the bottom of the car and a hole through the roof,
It fell through to the floor?
Yes, but just stopped about half an inch from the bottom.
It still would have blown up your whole house, wouldn't it?
Oh, what
Went
killed
off.
us? Oh, sure, it would have killed, most of the neighbors around us. But it didn't. It didn't go on. So anyhow, the engine worked, everything worked. So they drove it all around the area, and saying, ha ha, Germans, you'll never get us and stuff. And so that was really rather exciting. It was an American car. My father had an American car.
Really?
Yeah, he was one of probably a dozen people in England that had an American car.
Oh, my God.
And
Do you have another incident?
no, I can't think of one right now.
You said you had three, but
I know, but
if you think of it, tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, what was your opinion of the Germans?
Well,
What was your opinion back then?
Okay, there are two things. My opinion of the Germans then, obviously, was it was a nuisance because here was a country that was causing hardship,
To everybody.
to
Even
everybody.
the Americans, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so it was Germany and Japan and Italy against the rest of the world. The Italians were on the side of the Germans, and so was and the Japanese. So they were all trying to fight us. I had three brothers, two of them who were in the Air Force. My two elder brothers were in the Air Force. One was a squadron leader, and the other was what was called a flight commander, or he was an ace pilot. He'd go out on special missions and stuff. And he was supposed to not fly anymore. And
Why not?
Well, because he'd been out too much. He'd
yeah.
done a lot of missions. And he got shot down and killed. He went out, insisted on going on a special mission, and never came back. So I went to Buckingham Palace, which is where the King and Queen lived. We didn't have Queen Elizabeth then. We had King George and Queen Elizabeth's mother. And I went with my father, and we collected a whole bunch of medals on behalf of my brother. I met the King and Queen. My father knew the King anyhow. They were friends when they were youngsters. But we met the King and Queen, and we collected all the medals that this brother of mine had won during the war. Posthumously, it's called. When you're awarded medals and you're dead, they call it posthumously. Well, it's for memories for the family and things like that.
I know this is impossible, but when you lived, the whole time you lived in England, did you ever hear about Anne Frank? See, that's the book we read.
No. That, the Journal of Anne Frank did not really come to light when it was written, because it took quite a number of years after the end of the war, which was 1945, for all the dreadful things that the Germans had done in the concentration camps. You know, like they would gas 4 million Jews in one afternoon. That's what that
In one place?
in one place.
How?
Because they built these ovens to kill, great big gas ovens. And there are an awful lot of people who, I don't think that we probably know a Jewish family that has not had aunts and uncles and cousins killed by gas chambers.
Don't you mean great-grandparents?
No, like Harvey Hilson. His mother is alive, right? He was born over here, but his mother and father moved over here. Now they are the only ones left in their family alive. Everyone else was gassed.
You're kidding.
Yeah. So
you know someone from that?
Yes, we know.
Oh my! It seems like it's so far away.
No, a lot of Jewish people would be like that. Now, I hate the Germans, you know, because I don't like their voices. I don't like anything about them. And yet, my brother, who is 13 years younger than I am, was born during the war. So he doesn't have any bad feelings about the Germans and about the war.
He was born when?
During the war. He was born in 1943 or 1944, you know, when it was just about over. He was a little baby.
Oh, he didn't
I was born in 1932.
Yeah?
Don't say that. Well, it's true. So I know the Germans and the war. He doesn't. So to him, he's got no bad feelings about the Germans. Why should he? He hasn't had any bad treatments. There are some Germans from Vienna who are okay, but Berlin, I hate it. People from Berlin have got a way of talking. Would you ever go on a trip? I went back to Germany every 3 months after the end of the war because I did a lot of work in Germany. But they're not my favorite people.
Does your life differ, you know, today, these days, any different? Does your life differ any because of the war? Nowadays.
Okay. The things, it differs, because of the war. I think, I don't know that my life differs, but English people's life differs. I've already explained to you that the health of the nation was much better because of the war, because the poor people ate better food. The rich people could not buy better, you know.
No, wait. Before the war, the poor people didn't get any food unless they had money, right?
Right.
But then during the war, then why'd they give them food? They had to give everybody food?
It was because they started to go nationalistic, you know, where everything was run by the country, where everybody was equal. If you have men out there fighting to defend your country, then you're going to do the best for them. And so you had organized food lines. Like my father organized for the Greater London area. He was the commissioner for gasoline rationing. I mean, we call it petrol rationing over there. He was the one that allocated the coupons, because you couldn't even drive a car without special gas. And when you drove the car, you couldn't have lights. Here's a thing you guys didn't have over here. Blackouts. We were not allowed to have one chink of light anywhere in the British Isles, in case the Germans, in their planes, they could see it and they would bomb. So if you were driving a car, you had these funny masks. They almost looked like Star Trek, you know. They'd have masks on the headlights of the cars, so that any light would be only pointed down on the road for about 3 feet in front of you. So you never drove more than 10 miles an hour. If you ever took your car out, it was only for emergencies. Like, we had 3 cars, but we could only use one of them because they all had to be put up on blocks, you know. There just wasn't the petrol or the gasoline. Now, I also went away to boarding school.
Yeah.
Because my parents decided that it wasn't safe for me to be living in London with the bombs all the time.
Well, you were still in England in the boarding school, weren't you?
Yes, but there were some parts that were too far away for the Germans and their gas in their planes to reach.
Oh.
So I went with a good friend of mine, Sheila. She and I were sent away to boarding school. We were 10 years old, so I lived away from home, except for school vacations from the age of 10 till I got married.
That was because of the war, right?
No, it was because also everybody I knew in England at the time would send their child to boarding school anyhow. But the school I went to would not have been as far away from home. It would have been closer to home if it wasn't for the war. I would have gone to boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it was just happened to sort of live a type of family life where every single person I know went to boarding school. Oh darn, there was one funny thing I wanted to think of. It'll come back to me to do with the war and food and rationing, but never mind, it'll come back. What was it? Oh, very important. Now, have you heard of the buzz bombs and the silent bombs?
This isn't just telling you about it, it's suburb.
Okay. The Germans invented a flying bomb that would fly probably just a little bit higher than the tops of the trees or the tops of a tall building. And it was a big fat bomb with a very loud engine.
Did it actually fly like an airplane?
Yes, wings and all. It was a sort of thing that if you made it in plastic, every kid in the world would want one of them. It was sort of about the size of a go-kart. And they had a launching pad in Germany where they would catapult these things off, and they would, they didn't have to have men in them. They could just send these bombs, but of course they couldn't control them awfully well. They didn't have the sophisticated equipment that they do nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So we had moved out of London in 1943 after quite a few years of bombs. My father decided that he was going to move. We had our roof blown off 3 times. We had our windows blown out, everything except this dining room that we were living in with the sandbags surrounding us was, everything in the house just kept disappearing or being, blown out. So he moved to the country. It just happened that was the path that the bombs, these flying bombs, went on. So you'd just hear, they could send these off in the morning, in the afternoon, at night, anytime you want. They could send them in the daytime. You could see them. And so we were directly in the path. Now, the house I lived in was built in 1567, and it had a glass cupola roof, because when it was first built in 1567, it was very dark with stone flags inside, rather like a baronial. You see all these old movies of the Pit and the Pendulum type of thing. So our front hallway was rather like that and very gloomy. So during the Victorian era, what they did was to put glass domes over the top to make it light. Mm-hmm. And we had a very mysterious explosion, which happened to be the first silent bomb that exploded in Great Britain. Right over our house with this glass cupola, this glass roof, and not one window got broken.
Why?
Because we were in a valley, and I had a horse, and we had fields and things like that, but the house and the garden, we had a 5-acre garden, it was a very big garden, was in this dip, and the bomb exploded here and went out that way. But the shrapnel, it was, we had people from all over England trying to find out what it was, because they hadn't seen a silent bomb. And pieces were all over the place.
No, wait, most bombs are silent, or they want to go...
No, these are bombs that are flying.
I know, but they hadn't seen...
So the first one had an engine.
They're so used to buzz bombs?
Yes. So this one was launched without an engine. And so you couldn't hear it.
So
they could never have any sirens. It just flew.
And
then
it
would
glider?
Stop, yes. It would stop. It'd stop anywhere. You'd be walking along and you'd see one of these things, my God, I was never in that position, and they always say that when you can see it or hear it, you've had it, The silent one, we didn't hear it. We were lucky. But I just thought that might be interesting for you. We also had German prisoners of war working for us, because we had this very big garden, and we had 7 gardeners that were German, because they were kids who'd been shot down by English pilots. Mm-hmm. And
Where were they going?
They were bombing us, but they had concentration camps in England. Only we were kind, you know.
Well, you got, yeah. How are you? How are you?
Well, you know, when you've got 17-year-old blonde kids like, you know, your cousins and stuff, you can't be cruel to them. So anyhow, we used to hire them. We didn't have any of our own men in England to work.
Because they're all out fighting.
Right. So, well, we had 7 prisoners of war who used to work and help in the garden.
Were they nice to you?
They were terribly nice, you know. And my mother used to sort of, well, the cook used to bake cakes and things, and you know, they were just kids. They didn't choose to be in a war. And you know, that was quite an interesting episode, I guess.
Well, I think that's about as much as we can go.
No, it just depends how much tape it's left, whereabouts the brown stuff is.
So 383.
Well, that doesn't make any difference. It automatically turns off when you get to the end of it.
Well, I think that's enough because our period doesn't last as long.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, okay.